The- I actually just remembered. You had mentioned you're going to an event in January or February, I think, where you're going to be.
Um, January, I know I'm doing the 1 day San Fernando Valley comic book convention, which is always on a Saturday. And I think that's around I don't know, the 12th or something like that. That's in January. And I'll be there. I have a table and sell a bunch of stuff,
Hmm.
and meet a lot of people. Have a lot of friends come by. Um, I'll probably be doing your show again. I can't remember anything else offhand off the top of my head that.
I do remember like when you posted the ad for that on Facebook. One of the things you mentioned was that you were the one who originally, way before Marvel did it in modern times, had Jane Foster as Thor in a What If.
Yes.
And it was a very different time for that idea to be a thing. So, like, what inspired that?
It was funny because that was sort of done as almost a joke. Rick Hoberg, the artist of that, Roy Thomas, the editor, and I, at various, we would alternate. We used to throw really great parties.
Hmm.
And this time, the party happened to be over Rick's house. And we're all sitting around having a few drinks, and kicking around crazy ideas for what if stories. Because I was writing a bunch of them, Rick was drawing a bunch of them, and Roy was editing. And somewhere along the line, I said, "Hey, what if Jane Foster found the hammer of Thor?" And Roy said, it was a half a joke. I never really thought he was going to go for it. And then Roy said, "Yeah, I like that idea. That's kind of, and and so we did it. And it was just a standalone story by itself. And we hadn't thought about it in years. And then, because I don't read comics anymore, I don't know what's going on in the Marvel comic books. Somehow that idea got picked up, and it became a movie.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I didn't know anything about I didn't know about the movie, and but before that, the year before the movie, and the year before COVID, I was at this comic book. No, I don't remember. Maybe it was a year before the movie. I was at a guest at the Los Angeles Comic Book Convention, and there was a cosplayer there dressed up as Thor, and I thought, she was. I didn't know if she'd read my What If story or what, and I just made the comment to her, "Hey, I came up with the original idea for a female Thor," and she seemed like she wasn't too happy about that. And the name Thordis, which Rick supplied, was the name of somebody his wife went to school with. So it was a real Nordic name. We didn't make that up out of whole cloth.
Hmm.
And then we found out they were making the movie, and then Marvel was real good to us. They paid Rick and me nicely for coming up with the original story, which really had nothing to do with the movie. I mean, they didn't have to do that, but they did it, and they invited us to the world premiere and everything, And I remember sitting there in a movie theater when the end credits were coming on, and I said to Rick. Rick was sitting next to me. And I said, I wonder if we're going to get credit in any way for this, And we're looking at the names, and they're coming up, and they were in alphabetical order. And I spotted Rick's name first. I said, "Rick, there's your name." And then my name was right before his because, G came before H. And so that was, seeing that movie at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, the world premiere, with walking the red carpet and everything for that. That was like a big deal. And then we did a convention. We did Terrificon about a week later in Connecticut, and we signed a lot of autographs,
Hmm.
a lot of money, sold a lot of things, because everybody wanted that what if issue signed. And that, I guess, became a collector's item. But the whole thing started because we were at a party and had a few too many drinks and coming up with crazy ideas.
Huh?
It's funny how these things happen, how they start sometimes.
Yep.
I never thought they were going to make a movie with that idea.
Yeah. Although it wasn't exactly one of the better received movies, unfortunately.
No, it wasn't.
But I don't think I've ever asked, but I know you said you've gotten sick of superheroes, certainly in movies, but back when you were writing for Marvel and DC and all those others, like aside from original characters like Dr. Spectre for Gold Key, like what superhero did you really like working on? Were there any particulars?
I loved working on Captain America, and I loved working on the Invaders, which had Submariner and the original Human Torch, and a lot of the Golden Age characters. What I liked about Captain America, which is for the same reason I liked working on Tarzan, was those characters were so well defined that you could put them into a story and they could almost write themselves. You knew what they were going to do. And so, and plus being a fan of the old comics in both of their cases, Tarzan, I was a Burroughs fan, the novels, and it's a real thrill. It's great feeling just writing stuff. You're a writer, you know what I mean. It's better than, even if it's writing something you don't want to write about, it's still better than working in a supermarket bagging groceries, right?
Absolutely.
And I've written some pretty terrible things. I mean, things that were teen magazine articles and stuff like that. But when you take a character that you loved as a kid and grew up with, and suddenly you are directing their lives, that's kind of a real rush. It really is. And it was really, I was a big Superman fan for years, ever since I was a little kid. And I would have loved writing Superman. The closest I ever got to it, excuse me, I wrote an episode of the Super Friends, for the cartoon show. Had I known that Adam West was doing the voice of Batman on his show, I would have put Batman in it. But no, I had to put Green Lantern in and some of the more characters that weren't getting a lot of screen time. But I would have liked to have been able to say, hey, Adam West was saying my words in the show, but I didn't do that. Anyway, I love writing Captain America. And of all the superheroes, I didn't write that much superheroes. I always got, I was writing Sword and Sorcery, which I didn't like at all, really, but I wrote a lot of it. And horror, I love horror. So that was really my strong point, I think.
But what don't you like about Sword and Sorcery? I know you mentioned that before in the last one, but
the stories are all the same. If you get them down to reduce them down to story beats, it's always this evil wizard or sorcerer, or somebody in power who's got to get some certain thing, whether it's a amulet or a globe or something. And when he gets it, he's going to conquer the world, the netherworld, whatever. There's always a girl involved who gets captured by this evil guy. And then some stupid barbarian character has to go rescue her and defeat whatever powers whatever things this wizard character unleashes. And then he's got to defeat the wizard. They're all the same. And all the artwork is the same. It's a big burly guy who could probably barely move in real life, not do all the heroic things he does in the story. Big, sweaty, smelly, dirty-looking, burly, overly muscle-bound guy. And then you either have a scantily clad, beautiful girl clinging onto his leg, Or if she's fighting with him, she's always overweight, overly muscled, with her big rear end sticking in her face, and her face away so you see the back of her head. That's it. You have two scenarios for paintings, for artwork, and one plot. And they're always speaking in these flowery terms, you know. It's not, I'd like a mug of ale, so I have to have a flagon of ale, you know, all these archaic, um, unrealistic ways of talking. And they're all the same to me. But like I said, I've written a lot of it, and made a good living writing a lot of it. But I never really enjoyed it. But it's still better than working at the supermarket bagging groceries.
Very much so. I don't know. I think I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of sword and sorcery. I certainly don't hate it. I haven't written any of it myself yet.
I don't hate it. I just don't. It just doesn't interest me.
I mean, they're
all the same.
You mentioned at one point in a post, I think, that you counted Solomon Kane as part of that, though.
Well, Solomon Kane was so uptight and so puritanical. That was another reason I didn't like that character. I mean, I wrote a lot of Solomon Kane stories. Thankfully, many of them were just adaptations from the Robert E. Howard stories. And those, you know, Roy Thomas said I had to read the stories. So I read the stories. And then what I would do, I would take a ballpoint pen, and, you know, those were written Marvel style. That means the artwork comes first. You write a plot, the artist breaks it down, and then you write your dialogue over what he's drawn. And I made it real easy. I just took the stories, the printed prose stories by Howard, in the paperback, and I took a ballpoint pen and I blocked off. All right, for page one of the story, this happens, and I would block off like a page and a half or something of text and send it off to the artist. So there was little work involved for me. And I think I wrote a couple original stories. Roy wanted me to write a follow-up to his Solomon Kane versus Dracula. So I wrote a follow-up to that. And then I wrote a Frankenstein story, but not the monster. It was based on the legend of the real Frankenstein castle in Germany. And so I had like a prehistoric reptile kind of creature that came out of the well. And I had a little more fun with that one.
I don't know. Solomon Kane's actually, like, of Howard's different works, I actually would consider Kane my favorite. He's very puritanical, yes, but I almost see him as like a Puritan version of the Shadow, because he's just so driven by that desire to avenge the fallen and bring justice to the world.
I love the Shadow. I love the Shadow novels. I've read a lot of those.
I need to read more of them. I've got several of the radio shows on CD.
Well, the radio shows, the pulp magazines were completely.
Oh yeah.
Completely different. I mean,
yeah, he wasn't invisible.
He had any supernatural powers or not. He would just kind of blend in the shadow. And I tried that once. Back when I was a teenager, we decided to play. This little gang I was hanging around with. We decided to play at night. We'd be out till all hours of the night. Hide and go seek, like when we were kids. And you know, all the usual places we knew where to look. You know, under the porch and I saw a gangway that had a big shadow area. And I wanted to see if I could blend in the shadows by just standing in them. And I did it. And except I started giggling and laughing. Then when the guy found out where I was and, you know, called me it or whatever it was. But I actually did that. I actually tried that to see if you could disguise yourself by just hiding in the shadows.
Yeah.
You know, try wearing a mask or something, and you can't disguise yourself. I mean, you have a mask that almost covers your entire face, sometimes your whole head, and people still know who you are. You know, and somehow Clark Kent got away with it with the glasses. But
Well, yeah, Clark Kent's glasses, as far as that goes, like I remember Henry Cavill, who played Superman in the last couple of movies. He at one point actually stood under a huge billboard that was advertising the second one of those, had his face on it, big and larger than life, and he was just standing under it wearing fake glasses. People kept walking by, nobody recognized him.
let's see where I think where that whole disguise worked was in the original conception of Superman. When Siegel and Schuster first started doing their original early stories, Superman never stayed around long enough for anybody to get a good look at him. He would do his thing and then take off. You know, he was moving so fast, and he got. So the thing I always wonder about how when Clark Kent put the suit on, the business suit, he still had that huge physique. How did he cover that up? You know, he was still be a big guy. You know, and but on the radio show, you know, he did Bud Collyer did the voice. He did the two separate voices. That helped a lot, you know, and but even the mask, like the mask a domino mask, as they call it, the mask Robin would wear or something, you can't, because I tried it, you know, a couple of times, you know, with my friends, and they knew immediately who I was.
Yeah, the domino mask, you just kind of got to suspend your disbelief sometimes. Yeah. Although I do remember there was a revival of Will Eisner's The Spirit at one point, written by Darwin Cook, where they actually, it's the very first issue. The Spirit's helping this one reporter who's gotten caught up in the middle of things, and the reporter's grilling him the whole time, and she says, so do you really, that mask doesn't actually hide anything, right? It's covering like this much of your face. And he just puts his hand over her eyes and says, go ahead and describe me. And she goes, okay, I get it. You're an average looking guy with a distraction on your face. Okay. So.
Well, some of those masks were tiny, like Green Arrow. Didn't Green Arrow have a real tiny mask?
Yeah. He at least had a hat too. Yeah, but once he grew the goatee, I feel like it was a little bit harder because, like, hey, he has the same beard as Green Arrow. Do you think Oliver Queen might be? It's, before the beard, it was a little easier to believe. And then, of course, you have the Question, who just has a mask that makes it look like he has no face at all.
Yeah.
I always thought the Question was cool.
Yeah.
We first learned about him because they incorporated him into the animated series Justice League Unlimited in the early 2000s, voiced by Jeffrey Combs, the Reanimator.
Yeah.
And he just radiated cool throughout the whole episode.
I heard they brought back Spy Smasher too in some of those.
Yeah. There's an animated series, Batman the Brave and the Bold, all about Batman teaming up with a bunch of lesser known DC heroes. Like, they don't even bring Superman and Wonder Woman in until season 3. And they've got, like, obviously they have like Green Lanterns, Green Arrow, Aquaman. They have OMAC at one point.
OMAC.
They bring in Hawk and Dove. They bring in Detective Chimp. Buana Beast.
Rex the Wonder Dog.
I don't know if he was in there. I do know they had Bat Hound in it. Ace the Bat Hound. Space Ghost appeared at one point because Warner Brothers had acquired Hanna-Barbera by then. But yeah, they did some interesting stuff with some of the more obscure characters. So if you ever want to check that out, it's also very much an homage to the 60s Batman. So, and it's where the idea of Batman the musical finally happened, because they did a musical episode at one point.
Yeah, when I was a kid, you know, I still have this guilty pleasure affection for the Golden Age Blue Beetle.
Oh, he's in it. He's in Brave and the Bold too.
It's the old version.
They have The way they set it up is that, for the most part, the modern version that's got like this alien tech suit is
I consider the
primarily in it.
I consider the modern version the Steve Ditko version.
Well, the
The one before that, the one that was
yeah, well,
or in Fox Comics and
yeah, well, the way they set it up is that they've got the most recent Blue Beetle as this, the one that got the recent movie where he's got this alien technology. He's the current Blue Beetle, but he's carrying on a legacy started by that first Golden Age Blue Beetle. And there are a couple of time travel episodes where you go back to see him, or flashback episodes where you learn what happened to him. So there, he's incorporated in. There's that they've got some interesting stuff with how they play off the idea that these are two very different Blue Beetles, but they are part of the same legacy. So
I liked also, speaking of Ditko characters, I liked the original way he did Captain Atom. When he had the yellow, the gold suit, the golden red suit, and those kind of short stories. You know, they weren't really long stories. I like that. I like those.
Yeah, Ditko had some interesting stuff.
I think he was probably, even though my favorite comic book artist of all time is Joe Kubert. When they talk about King Kirby and all that, I think the real innovator back in those days was Ditko. And if you look at, people, I was never really a fan of Ditko's Spider-Man for some crazy reason, but looking back, I think he was a master. The best he did was the horror and the fantasy and the science fiction stuff, the short story things. Some of those stories he did pre-code. Like for this magazine is Haunted and The Thing. Incredible stories he did back then. And he wasn't afraid to try something. Even those, those Gorgo and Conga things, they're all really well done. But I look at the stuff he was getting paid probably peanuts for, those Charlton, they all had those kind of generic titles, something or Tales of Suspense or whatever. He always gave it his best effort,
Yep, you can tell.